everybody. Welcome to Randy Starts a Side Hustle. We're back. I have an amazing guest today, guys. It's going to be a fantastic podcast. I think this is going to be one of our best ones. Make sure you grab a pen and piece of paper. I know I hear you guys I tell you that all the time, and I know it's recorded. I know you can go back and look at it, but if you get a piece of paper and a pen, you write down a lot of the principles and things that we'll be talking about, they'll sink in more. You can put them up on the wall. There's a lot of things that you can get from taking notes and writing things down. Okay, just a little tip. Let me tell you a little bit about my guest, okay? My guest is one of my best friends. He's someone that I have known longer than any other of my friends. Marcel and I went to elementary school together. So just so you have an idea, we lived in the same neighborhood. We hung around the neighborhood every single day. We had a childhood like no one else had. I'm telling you, very few people had a childhood like the one we had. And I'm super excited to bring him up and talk about everything we got to talk about. I can go on and on talking about Marcel and I, but let me introduce you to him and let me tell you a little bit about Marcel, okay? I got a couple things written down here that have happened since we were little kids to now. It's amazing, okay? Amazing. I'm just going to hit a couple things, okay? Marcel is an executive pastor at his church, okay? He's been an executive pastor at his church since 2005. He's been going to the church since he was 12 years old. Okay, so he is like the father of this church. He is, I've been watching him since I was younger, and I've seen him there trudging along. And he's also the owner of a coaching agency that I'm going to let him tell you about, because that's one of the things that we wanted to talk about too, was that part of the business and how he has his own business and runs it on a daily basis. And he's going to share some really good nuggets of information for you guys. He's written 27 books, guys. He's going to tell you all about that. I want to bring up my really good friend, Marcel Sanchez. What's up, Marcel? How are you, man?
What's the word, Mr. Randy? Good to see you, man.
Oh, man, it's good to see you, too. It's good to see you. It's exciting that we got to hang out the other day with all the guys.
Thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it.
How you been, man? Everything good?
Doing well, doing well. Just got back to my home office. I have my daughter's dog behind me taking a nap. So we're doing good. We're doing good. And yeah, it's been a busy week, but I'm excited to be here and share with your audience and encourage them.
Oh, it's going to be wonderful. Let's start. Let's start. I got some questions here so that we can have a little guide to keep us on path, and we can have a good conversation. Because if not, we'll be all over the place. Because we can talk about so much, because it's been so many years that we've known each other. But let's start with this, Marcel. Why don't you share with us a little bit about yourself and your family?
Sure. Well, my parents came from Cuba during the, Mario Boatlift time, and they were, you know, hey, they're pioneers, right? They came to this country, and my dad, he left Cuba. He escaped Cuba, rather. They were looking for him, and he made it to the country. My great grandfather on my mother's side, he was a violinist, so they were able to come over a lot easier than my dad. So they met and they got married, and then they had myself, and I have one sister and two younger brothers. And we grew up in Miami, born and raised in Miami, which is a melting pot. And we didn't have a lot of money, but our family was pretty tight. We did the best we could, and we learned a lot. My parents were both hardworking. My mom worked as a nurse at Palmetto Hospital for over 30 years. My dad was a plumber, and he would take me to work with him. I saved up enough money to buy my first car cash. So I learned a lot from my parents, very grateful. And, I was able to go to school. They really couldn't help me financially with school, but I was able to get through my bachelor's, my master's degree. And I owe it all to my parents, really. They were the ones that pushed me through, and they said, no, you got to study. You've got to do what you got to do. You've got to get ahead. You have to do better than we've done. So that was a real big source of motivation for me. And then shortly after high school, I met my wife, Yami, and I met her at a church camp. She was pitching the softball, and I told my dad I'm going to marry that girl. She's really cute. Said, I'm a man of faith. I'm going to marry that girl. And we did. I have two great kids, Luke and Savannah. They're adults. Luke is 28. My daughter Savannah, she's 25. And that's a little bit about me and my family. My wife and I, we've been married for 32 years since December. And because of that, I do, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, a lot of the stuff that I do for couples with marriage coaching and seminars and things like that. So yeah, that's my family.
That's awesome, Marcel, and I know his family very well. I grew up with them. We grew up in the same neighborhood. I would see them almost every day. This is the kind of relationship that we had. There was 4 or 5 of us, and we hung tight everywhere, all over the neighborhoods, from one house to the other to the other. It was like a big family. It was wonderful. What a great childhood we have. Marcel, tell us a little bit about your journey of faith, because I want to talk about faith, because that's one of the main reasons I wanted you to come on here, because I know that you're a pastor. You've been a pastor for a long time, and I know that you're also an entrepreneur. And I wanted us to talk about, because like when I start my day, I start my day spending time with the Lord, and that's how I start my day, and I've been doing that for a long time already. And I want you to tell us a little bit about your journey of faith.
No, and that's a good segue. And I think back, behind my house, a good friend of ours, Richard, he and his family lived there for many years. And there was a street light right next to his house. And I remember one day looking at that street light and asking the question, isn't there more to this life? And, I'm not sure where the idea came from. I'm sure it was the Lord. But I just looked at the street light. And I remember, because before the street light turned on, I had to book it home. If not, my dad was going to take out the belt. So that was a very good indicator of, hey, you got to run. So I remember that moment. I mean, it's still etched in my head, and that was over 40 years ago. But I remember thinking, isn't there anything more? And you remember at that time we were playing sports, we were chasing girls, we were just having fun, enjoying our summers. Video games had just come out, but there was something in my heart, something in my spirit that was longing for something more. And I didn't have the answer, but I certainly had the desire to find something more. And one day, my mom, driving down 57th Avenue, it was only a 2-lane road. Back then, now it's like a 3-lane on each side. She said, hey, why don't we stop at that church and check into church on Sunday and check it out? It was a Spanish church. It was called Iglesia Bíblica Bautista during that time. And, my Spanish was okay. So we went there and checked it out. And, at first it was okay. And I would listen to the sermon. I still had some questions. I didn't understand 100% of what the pastor was saying. But what I noticed was, as we were going back week after week, I started feeling this conviction in my heart. And I was only 12 years old, right? I mean, I didn't have a big problem with the bottle or drugs or anything like that. But I felt this deep conviction of, there were certain things that I was doing that I knew were wrong, but I didn't really tell anybody, right? My dad used to hide money. It was a clip of money underneath the toilet seat, in between the back part of the toilet and the seat itself. And he was a plumber, so he would find very creative ways to hide money. And I would go and occasionally help myself to a $20 bill or whatever, right? Nobody knew that. And I remember when I started feeling convicted, like, that's wrong. You shouldn't steal. You shouldn't steal, especially from your dad. And over a period of time, when the pastor started talking about sin, and then I realized, yeah, that's what it's called. It's sin. That's not right. And then I started reading in God's word how sin, separates us from God. And we're guilty of our sin. And I knew I was guilty. I mean, no one had to tell me. And the times that I would get my brothers in trouble, and I would lie and get them in trouble, and they would take the blame for what I had done. And even as a kid, you start feeling that guilty conscience, and then you realize, man, that's just not right. And then all of a sudden you realize, but God offers forgiveness. And then I heard the story of the gospel, which is, God sent his son, his only begotten son, to come and take our place and pay the penalty for our sins. There was nothing I can do in my own strength. There was no amount of money that I could give to the church to be right with God. But Jesus came and he suffered and he died on a cross. He shed his blood on the cross. He was buried and he rose again from the grave. And if I would put my faith in him and what he has done, and if I would confess my sins to him, then my sins could be forgiven and I can have a new life. So when I understood that, and it took me a while, and I remember praying and asking God to come into my heart and asking Jesus to forgive me, my life started to change. Not this crazy lightning flash transformation, but little by little, I started realizing, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to take a different path. I'm not going to steal anymore. I'm not going to lie and do this as I was doing before. And little by little, God started changing my life. And then later, as an adult, what I realized, and I had two people come knocking on my door every week, and they were sharing with me things about the Bible. I knew what they were saying was not right, but I had no way of proving it. So God put in my heart a desire to study his word and really to prepare myself for the next conversation. That gave me a greater love for God's word. It gave me a greater understanding of God's word. And during that time, I was working at UPS, and I was talking to people about Christ. I was encouraging people in their faith to follow God. And then I started learning something that was really important. Is there a way to live out your faith in your business, at work, in a way that is not churchy, but in a way that inspires people, encourages people, and gives people hope for their future and for their life? And one of the things I found was there was a way to close the gaps in my business that later on I started, in my family, in relationships. And as I studied God's word, he showed me if I followed his way, relationships could be better, business could be better, life could be better, because his way really is the best way to follow. And one of the things I remember thinking is, God allowed me to experience so many things, just like many people watching this or listening to the podcast. I wrestled with my faith. I struggled in my faith, when I became a little bit older, just like many that are listening. I neglected my health. I stopped paying attention to my health. I got so busy at work. I was working crazy hours. I was overworked in corporate America, just like many people. I mean, it was just a reality. I struggled in my marriage. When we first got married, it was a struggle. I struggled in my family life. How do I raise kids? And how do I do this in a godly way? For a time, I stopped pursuing my purpose. I got distracted. And then when I started my business, I was stressed. I was overwhelmed, and all these things really led me back to my relationship with Christ. And to me, that's been one of the essential foundations of my life. So now, for an example, there's a men's coaching group that I lead. It's a once a month coaching group. And we talked about this simple idea. How can we align critical areas of our lives to God's word? My purpose, my spiritual life, resources, relationships, and my health. How can I align these things with God's word so that I can have success in business, in my health, in my relationships, in my spiritual life? I mean, listen, I know a lot of guys that are multimillionaires, but their relationships are a total mess. That's not success. I know guys that are multimillionaires, but they have no purpose. They just work to buy more things. That's not success. It's not. I know guys that do really well financially, but they're not generous. That's not success. And you know, yeah, yeah. And the last thing I'll say, and then we can continue, is many faith-based professionals, what they believe is this: I have to sacrifice my faith, my family, and my health in order to have business success. And Randy, you know this, it's simply not true. Go ahead.
It's not true at all. Not true at all. Marcel, that's great, man. I love to hear that story. That's awesome. Um, I can totally relate with that. What I wanted to say was I remember when I was walking around with that space, that hole in my life. And I've talked about this. If you guys go into my videos, you'll see I have a short testimony that I did there, and it talks about this. But I'm just going to talk briefly. I remember when I was empty, when I was not, and it's funny because I grew up in a Catholic household. I grew up going to church every Sunday with my mom. You remember, you know, and I remember walking around, like you said, doing business, making money, driving the nice cars, having the nice, life experiences. But you know what? It wasn't fun. I had the space. And when I finally understood, and when I finally started my relationship with Jesus, my life changed, brother. It changed. Your priorities change. Your ethics. You start realizing, no, you can't say that when you're talking to someone about what you're selling. That's not right. You can't spin it a different way to make it look different so you can make a sale. No, just be honest about what you're doing. Do it properly, and you're going to have success, and people are going to buy your product or service if they're interested in it. You don't have to spin it a different way to get more sales and trick people and do things unethically. And yeah, that's right. You don't have to compromise your ethics, your relationship, how you are, your faith, because you want to be a successful businessman. You don't. Marcel, let's move on to our next one. Okay. How did you get started in business? How did you become an entrepreneur? What made you go that way? Because I know that you've invested so much time at the congregation with your congregation, and I know that you used to work for UPS, so you had a traditional job, just like all of us have had, And then you become an entrepreneur. I know that you're a coach. You're doing a lot of amazing things, and you're doing something like I know that. I don't think many people are doing it, if anybody is doing what you are doing. And I'm going to let you go ahead and talk about that, Marcel. Go ahead.
I'll give you a little bit of a background. When I was at UPS, I started, they call it affectionately as a hub rat, unloading large trailers, right, in the middle of the summer. So you go in with a clean shirt, you come out with holes in your shirt, and you don't smell really good either. And, but it was a great experience because you pay your dues, right? So I did that for about 5.5 years. I was a driver at UPS for almost 6 years. And then I got into sales. One of my Jamaican friends said, hey, why don't you get into business development? And I told him, I said, look, I don't know how to sell. And, I didn't even know how to send a fax. So how am I going to develop business for the company? But, after I thought about it, I prayed about it. I said, I'm going to submit my resume, put it in there. And it was really interesting because it was one of those God moments. I was at an interview with 4 executives, and they were just drilling me with questions. And they said, you have 0 sales experience. You have 0 business experience, working with companies. Why should we hire you? And I said, well, let me tell you this. You're right. I have no business, selling products because I don't have experience in sales. But let me give you a different approach. What if you train me to sell how you want me to sell? Because I know the company like the back of my hand. I know the ins and outs of the company. I know how the packages flow. I know where they go. I know where there's an issue, how to troubleshoot it, and I know the company well. So if you teach me how to sell, I can sell the services. And it was funny because at the end of that interview, I got in my car, and one of the CDs that I had playing on was a song titled All Things Are Possible. It's really funny. So I drove home, and then I got a call, I think a few days later, and they said, hey, we want to bring you in. And then they offered me the job. So I started as a sales executive, then I became an account manager, and then I got promoted to a sales manager. But during yes, and UPS, and I love the company. It's, we had a joke in the company: how do you bleed? You bleed brown because you spend so many hours there. But what I loved about the company, it was really like an MBA in business. They train you to be a consultant, to take a consultative approach to sales, as opposed to what so many people fear, a carsman type sales approach. It was very consultative. We acquired a lot of companies. And then during that time, we started developing training materials. And there were some training materials that didn't really apply to South Florida perfectly. So a friend of mine and myself, we started creating additional training material to train the people in the South Florida district. And we created videos, we did all these things. And I started developing a heart for training. And that was before I went to the church and, as far as full time as a pastor. So when I left UPS in 2005, I had a customer contact me. He was the president of a large technology company. And he said, Marcel, can you help me? And I said, well, I don't know. What do you need help with? And he said, my managers all work in silos. None of them talk to each other, but I need them to talk to each other because it's affecting our performance and our production. So I developed training. It was a bilingual training in English and in Spanish for the managers. And essentially, the training was how to practice the one another's of the Bible in a corporate setting. That was the heart of the training. So we went through this. It took us about 6 to 8 weeks. And at the end of the 6 to 8 weeks, we made progress. They had broken down some walls, and the company did really well. So that was like my first gig. And then and it paid really well. I gave the guy a contract. you know he said, is that for all sessions? I said, no, that's for one session. He said, okay. So he kind of chuckled, and it went well. So then afterwards, I started contacting different people, and it was a slow progress. And I would develop customized training for their companies. So, one of the largest companies I worked for was BMW, and I did training for, a group within BMW. That's all I can really say about it confidentially, but it was a great success. And that really gave me a heart to continue developing training, and that evolved. And then later, I started doing consulting. Companies were having issues, primarily multi-ethnic companies that, let's say, their executive base was primarily American and their employees were primarily Hispanic. So there was a disconnect. They would call me in. I would help them with their mission, their vision, their values, set that up, communicate that to the people in English and in Spanish to help their company align. So I did that for several years. And then most recently, and all throughout this process, I have been writing different books. And probably in the last 3 to 4 years, I really zeroed in on coaching, because what I find is you can deliver exceptional training, but unless you have coaching to follow up, over a period of 6 months, people forget. Randy, you could be the best trainer in the world, but tomorrow they're going to forget 30% of what you taught them.
I'm in the process of creating that for my team now. That it's got to be ongoing. You got to do it every day if you want to be at the top of your game every day.
So it's a combination of training and coaching and follow up. And really what I find is you have the human side, right? So you have corporate training, you have corporate coaching, but then someone says, hey, bro, I'm having this challenge in my marriage. What do I do? I'm having this problem with my kids. How should I approach this? Or I'm really wrestling with whether I should accept this promotion or not. What should I be thinking about? And then what happens is, now you get into their space, right? This is not a corporate, now it's their world. Hey, this is what I'm struggling with right now. That's where coaching comes in.
And what's different about that, and that's why I was so excited when you were telling me about it yesterday, is that most times, if Tom, this is just an opinion, You tell me if I'm right. Most time they end up going to a psychiatrist or a doctor and to meet up in a medical session to talk about that stuff that they're gonna talk to you about in a non-invasive coaching platform to work. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, and really, as a certified coach, we refer a lot. So if somebody, if I start talking to somebody and I realize this person, they have an issue with alcohol, as an example, or they are depressed, my job at that moment is to say, before you get coaching, you need to get help. You need to go and speak to the psychologist. You need to speak to the counselor. You need to, let's get to a healthy place so that you can receive coaching, because if you're still fighting the quote unquote demons of your past, you're not going to be you're not going to be effective in this coaching session. So the referral is a big part of it. But to your point, when the person is ready and they have these dreams and aspirations, you don't need to go see a counselor. You need to get a coach to help you think through some of these challenges and really help you to put together an action plan to move forward. Because that's the key. The key is, how can we develop an action plan to help move forward? That's really the key.
Yeah. And it's hard. It's hard to build a business and build your financial part of your life when you're having those relationship issues at home, bro. It's tough. You know what I mean? It takes you out of your game. So I'm really excited about that. Tell me, Marcel, let me ask you this. How do you serve today, and how do you help them? What are you doing now? Talk to us about your actually, wait, I have a little bit here. Let me see. Yeah. Let's do that. Talk to us about how you're served today and what you do to help them.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I I love helping people. And I think at the heart of coaching, there has to be a desire to really help people. I tell people all the time, and sometimes people are shocked when I say this. I tell them, you don't need coaching. You don't need coaching. The question is, and I got this from another guy who's a great coach. I said, you don't really need coaching. The question is, do you want coaching? Do you want to get better? Do you want to move your marriage forward? Do you want to overcome obstacles in your relationship? Do you want to reach some of the goals that you've set, but then every year you're coming back and saying, well, I want to reach this goal again. I didn't hit it last year. The question is, do you want coaching? And one of the ways that I serve people is by helping them clarify what is it that they really, really want. I mean, we all have this is what I think other people want me to say. This is what I think other people want from my life. But the question is, what do you really want? And what I find, Randy, is sometimes people they feel uncomfortable sharing that because they feel, well, if I share that, it's going to seem awfully selfish. But sometimes what I find is it's actually selfish not to share your honest desires. Hey, this is what I would love to do. That may not mean you're going to do it tomorrow, but let's think about, okay, if this is what's been burning in your heart for the last 3-4 months, 3-4 years, let's talk through those things, because if this is not going away, then maybe this is something that God is putting in your heart to do, but maybe you're just afraid to take the next step, or you're afraid, what are they going to think about me? You can imagine, right? As a pastor, and I have my own business, one of the mindsets I had to get over was, well, what happens if my business does really well? And what happens if I can publish several books? What are people going to think about me? Are they going to think I'm just doing this for the money? And I'm not. But I had to get over that mindset, because my honest motivation was, I want to help people. I give way more books away for free than I do selling books.
You had to get over worrying about what other people were thinking of you. You know? Yeah. My give a shit button broke a long time ago. I don't care what people think anymore. I do what's right and what's ethical, regardless of what they think. But you learn con los golpes. You know what I mean?
That's right. Con lo cocodazo. You know, you hit your head up against the wall and you learn. So the way I help people today, to answer your question, I help business leaders through executive coaching. You know, and here's what I tell people. If you are wondering if coaching can work for you, I'll give you a free coaching session. No strings attached. It can be a 30-minute session, it might be an hour session. We'll talk for 60 minutes. And then at the end of that 60 minutes, if you don't think coaching can help you, no worries. That's fine. But if you, at the end of the 60 minutes, feel, you know, this is a good starting point, I'd like to continue, then I just talk to them about the different coaching packages that I have. So with that, I help executive leaders in areas of their career, performance, you know, deciding whether to leave the company, to start their own business, etc. I help couples. I do a lot of marriage coaching. I've developed 3 different courses that are online for couples. I'm editing a few right now. And then I also help people that want to publish their first book. You know, if they've had this dream to publish a book, but honestly, they haven't published their first book because they need accountability. They need somebody that's been where they are to help them, to give them a plan, to check in on them. So I help people realize there is a way to get from where you are to where you want to be, but you're going to have to execute, and you're going to have to, hey, get up an hour earlier. You're going to have to be more efficient. You know, if you've got 3 or 4 kids running around and you want to publish a book, you can do it. You just have to be committed to doing it. So those are the people that I help. So business executives, those that want to publish their first book, and married couples, typically professional married couples. Those are the 3 buckets.
That's awesome. Good stuff. You know, and you know what I picked up, you know, and tell me if I'm wrong. What I picked up from something you said in the beginning was, you know, a lot of times people have a hard time telling you what they want. They have a hard time telling you what their dreams are, what they want to be, what kind of life they want to have with their wife. They're embarrassed to tell their wife. Like when I talk to my wife sometimes, I go, babe, you got to be ready because I'm a little crazy. So like what I'm going to talk to you about right now is at another level. So don't get scared. You know what I mean? Because it's going to happen. You know, we're going to do this. This is my dream. And I share it. You know what I mean? If you don't talk about your dreams or what you want and you put it in front of you, it's hard to attain it. It's hard to go after it and grasp it. And how are you going to get the support from your spouse or whoever the relationship is with the people that you're working with around you? How are you going to get the support if they don't even know what you're chasing, what you want, what your desires are? They don't know. So yeah, man, I always talk about that, Marcel. I say you have, like, you'll hear me talking about the dream in business all the time. You know, you got to know why you're doing what you're doing, and that's going to give you the oomph to do the things that you don't feel like doing on those days that you don't feel like doing those things that you need to do to achieve your goals. You know what I mean? Yeah, you got to communicate.
Quick story with you. You know, we've all been to the division of motor vehicles, right? The DMV, and you know, they go to work every single day. It's a blue collar job for the most part. The people at the counter, and you know, it's a tough job, I have to admit. But if they don't feel, you know, super enthusiastic, what do? They go to work. They clock in, they work 8 hours, they clock out. The challenge with entrepreneurs, Randy, is sometimes we operate based on how we feel. That's a huge problem. You have to have that same discipline as that person at the counter at the DMV. They're not excited to see 200 customers in a day, but guess what? They have a family to feed. They have to do what they have to do. You know, the truck driver, the same thing. You know, they may not feel like driving from Miami to California over the next several days, but guess what? They have a mortgage, they have car payments, they have a wife at home, and they have kids. And I think sometimes as an entrepreneur, we can dream. Dreams are important, But then you have to say, okay, if I've been dreaming for all this time and I haven't taken action, then I have to be honest with myself and say, I need somebody to help me. That's what they need. It's not a magic pill. It's not, you know, I need somebody to guide me. We all grew up watching Star Wars, right? And we remember Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker, he had all the potential in the world, right? But he didn't have the confidence. So here we have Obi-Wan Kenobi. And what does he do? He appears. He's a guide. He's encouraging him, just like, in Donald Miller's book, The Story Brand, right? We all need a guide. We all need a coach, somebody to walk us through to get us from where we are to where we need to be. And sometimes it's just that steady, calm voice saying, you can do this. Let's revise the plan. Let's go forward. What's getting in the way? How can you overcome this? And just to challenge us to think differently. And when we have somebody to challenge us to think differently, then that's when we can really make forward progress. But if we're not growing as a professional, if we're not listening to different audiobooks, if we're not reading books, if we're not going to conferences, and if we don't have somebody coaching us through, we're not going to get to where we could be in our business, in our health, in our married life.
I promise you guys that I didn't tell him to say that. I didn't tell him to say that. And I talk about that on every one of my podcasts. You have to work on yourself. You have to read the books. You have to listen to the audios and go on and listen to it. You have to listen to the audios that teach you how to build your business, and you got to listen to audios that pump you up, that motivate you, that make you take action when you don't feel like taking action. And you got to go to the seminars. You got to go to the events, the conventions. Those three things are vital in your growth, and you're vital to the success of your business and your life, because it doesn't just help you in business. It helps you in your life. It helps you in your personal relationships, because that's what he works on. That's what he does. He coaches people on how to manage their relationships. Same thing, guys. Same thing. You gotta work on yourself every day. You gotta work on yourself every day. Marcel, that was awesome. Okay, Marcel, as a coach, like all of us do, you have a formula that you teach. What's the formula?
It's a very simple framework. And I apply this when I coach business executives, married couples, people that want to write books, or people that simply want to reach specific goals. I call it the 3 C's of success. And what I tell people is the 3 C's to success. What do you need to really move things forward in your life, really push through? There are 3. You need a commitment, you need a coach, and you need a course of action. A commitment and a coach and a course of action. So let me explain those in different contexts. So let's say, for an example, you're a married couple and your marriage is blah. It's okay. You're not excited about driving home, right? You're just driving slow. It's okay if I get there a little bit later. There's the sparks have stopped flying. But at one point in your marriage, things are really good, but you want to get better. So to that couple, I say, well, number one, you need to renew your commitment. You need to renew your commitment to God. Marriage, husband and a wife together under God until God separates you by death. That's the first commitment, a commitment to God. Then the second part is a commitment to one another. Randy, the biggest challenge that we have in marriage is the person that we see in the mirror every single day. It's not my spouse's fault. It's on me. I set the tone in my marriage. The character issues that I have to own them. I have to work through them, because I can't blame her or my kids or my job or anything else. I have to own it. And what happens is you have to make a commitment to God, to study his word, like we said earlier, to follow God's word and allow his spirit to shake you up on the inside, to show you the real you, not the you that everybody thinks you are, but the real you when you close the door and you get home. One of the things about marriage is like a mirror. Your spouse shows you the real you. They know your faults. They know all the challenges you have. They know the frustrations. They know what you get angry about. So you have to make a commitment to your spouse to love them and respect them the way the Bible tells us. The greatest need a wife has is to be loved by her husband. The greatest need a husband has is to be respected by his wife. And what happens is when I don't love my wife, that's going to hurt my marriage. When my wife doesn't respect me, that's going to hurt my marriage. So each of us are equally as responsible to love and respect each other in the context of a growing marriage. So for a marriage, that's the commitment part. Then you have the coach part. So the coach comes in, and what I do, for an example, with marriage coaching, they take a course and then I follow up with them either twice a month or once a month. And then I ask them, what did you learn? What did you learn in the last session? What did you write down in your notes? What does that mean for your marriage? And you know, the funny thing, oftentimes they're telling me, Marcel, this is what I learned. This is what I have to change. This is the attitude that came out. This is the sin that I had to confess. And then I ask them, okay, so what do you do now? And they already know what to do. So they have a commitment, they have a coach, and then they have a course of action. And that course of action is a plan. You know, there's a marriage formula success path that I developed, and I help couples walk through that path. You know, just like for the executives, there's a success path for them to walk through, because the idea is you need a commitment, you need a coach, a guide, and then you need a proven path to get you from where you are to where you want to be. And this happens over time. This is not an overnight success, but over time, you're growing together. You're learning together. You're talking together about things that really affect your relationship. Now, on the business side, you have somebody who they say, you know, here's some goals. I'm crazy busy. It takes me an hour to get to work every day and come home. And I've got 2 kids, they're in school, and I want to reach these goals. So we start talking about, okay, tell me about your time management. Tell me about your day. Walk me through a typical day. What are you doing? How are you spending your time? And then we talk through ways to say, okay, what could you do differently this morning to give you an edge and give you an extra 20 minutes to study this material that you need to study? And all of a sudden, instead of making excuses, they start looking at possibilities. And they start realizing, you know, I could do that. You know, Saturday morning, I love to sleep in, but hey, you know what? What would happen if you got up at 6 a.m. on Saturday morning, your family gets up at 9:30? What would happen if you would spend 3.5 hours working on getting that book published? How would that change the amount of writing that you're doing every month? So a lot of this is simply taking a look at what they're doing, challenging them to think deeper about what they could do differently, and then letting them formulate a plan. And now I'm holding them accountable to follow that plan. And I'm encouraging them, I'm coaching them, I'm sharing with them ideas. You know, I do a lot of multitasking. I listen to audiobooks as I work out a couple of times a week. So I share everything that I do with them to help them be more productive. And then when it's all said and done, Randy, what they do is they look back and they realize, wow, in the last 3 months, in the last 6 months, I've really gotten a lot done. You know, I'm so much closer to my goal now than I have been over the last 3 years. So I've done more in 4 months than I've done in the last 3 years. And what happens is they gain greater confidence. Now they're more confident. Now they're more disciplined. Before, it's not that they were lazy, they simply weren't disciplined to do the things that they needed to do. And now they're being called on it and they're being challenged. And guess what? They're more productive. They're taking action.
That's amazing. That's amazing. That's awesome. Yeah, it's and it's the same way in business. It's the you're taking it from the relationship into the business, which would be in your case that you're helping others write a book. And I love that you the principles. It's incredible because it's the same principles that I talk about as well. You know, you gotta have the three C's. You gotta have your commitment. I remember the first time I got involved in business, they made me sign a commitment, man, and I had to sign. And I had to sign the commitment, and the commitment was to read this book every month, whatever book it was, How to Win Friends and Influence People, The Magic of Thinking Big. Bro, I read 30 books my first month. First year. My first year, I read 30 books. I was instructed to read one a month, but I have never seen those type of books before. I had never been introduced to that before. So it changed my life.
Here's a funny story. I got to tell you this. This friend of mine comes up to me a couple years ago, and I'm at the church, and he says, and this is on a Sunday morning, right? He says, "Hey, Marcel, would you pray for me?" I said, "Tell me, what about?" And he said, "Well, I've been thinking about writing a book, and I haven't been able to write it." I said, "Okay, how long have you been thinking about writing this book?" And he said, "I've been thinking about writing this book for 3 years." And I looked at him and I said, "I'm not going to pray for you." And so you can imagine, right? We're in church. I'm one of his pastors. He looks at me like, "What? You're not going to pray for me?" And I said, "No, I'm not going to pray for you, but I'm going to help you put together a plan so you can start writing your book tomorrow morning." It takes some action. And he was a dreamer. He had this dream, but a dream without a plan is just a dream. That's right. So yeah, I hear what you're saying. And the reality is action is the key.
Action is the key. You have the commitment. You have the commitment. You have the coach. They tell you. You have a support team. You have to follow our steps. If you follow these proven success steps, you will have success at the end. How does it feel when you help someone, Marcel? How does it feel when they achieve their goal? How does that make you feel?
It makes me feel really fulfilled. And I'll give you one example. One of my last coaching clients, they were a rock star. I mean, they were literally a rock star in their company. They built a company. They weren't the CEO, but they were part of the executive team. And she helped build this company. And it was funny because their competition was trying to take them out for years, and they couldn't. So the competition made them an offer and bought their company. So her boss sold the company. They all got a fat check. They were very happy. She moved on. She went to another company. So she calls me. She's been in this company for a while, and she said, "Marcel, I need some clarity because I don't know if I need to go start a business, if I need to stay in this company or leave and work for another company." So she was wrestling with 3 different things. And we started our coaching session. The first session, I may have talked maybe for 3-4 minutes in the entire 2-hour session. And I just said, "I want to hear the story. Give me the backstory on the other company. Give me the present story. Tell me where you are, what you're feeling, all this stuff." And then over the next several weeks, what I discovered was what she really wanted and what she really did not want. At the heart of it was she knew what it took to build a company from several $100,000 to several $1 million. I think they sold it for, I don't know, $30 million or something. And the struggle that she had was answering the question, I know what it takes to get the company from here to here. The question is, at my age, do I really have the energy to do that? Do I really want to do that? And I remember asking her the question, do you really want to do this? And she looked at me and she thought about it. And she said, well, I don't really want to go start my own business. I'm not an entrepreneur. And I'm comfortable with the company, and so I don't think I'm going to be looking for other jobs. So I think I just want to stay and help them grow. So she wasn't putting this pressure on herself, but she had to answer the question, what is it that I really want to do? So she wanted to be a contributor, but she didn't want to have that pressure on her back that all of the success of this company depended on you. And then once we got through that, the rest of our coaching calls were great because she had clarified what she didn't want, what she refused to do, and what she was ready to do. And by the end of the coaching, session and our time together, the coaching agreement, I realized, okay, she's in a good place. You could see her stress level, her body language. She was much more relaxed. And I think for me, I knew it helped her. And she was very thankful. So yeah, it was a good feeling. I still check in with her, see how she's doing, but she's in a great place. She has clarity and she's much more confident now in her role and what she's there to do. So yeah, to answer your question, it's a great feeling.
I love it. It feels so good when you help people make it to the next chapter in the company, the next level, the next promotion. They walk across, getting their promotion, and you had a little part of it. You had a little part of helping them do it, and it's a very gratifying feeling. I love it. I enjoy it. Another common denominator that Marcel has been talking about almost the whole time, and you hear me talking about it all the time. We got to help others. The more people that we can help achieve their dreams, the more of our dreams we're going to achieve. That's the way it works. We got to help others. The more people we can help, the more of what we want we're going to get. Man, it's been a great time with you, Marcel. I appreciate you coming out on the show. I'm going to let Marcel, if someone's looking for coaching, guys, on top of all the other, I'm going to post all his links to all his social media and whatever he gives me to do. I'll put that up there. But if you want to reach out to Marcel, you can send him a text message to contact him for any coaching, for any of the stuff that he's spoken about. And you can reach him at 786-554-0312. I'm going to say it again, 786-554-0312. Marcel Sanchez. Great job, man. Thank you for coming on the show. You're amazing. I'm super proud of you, brother. I'm super proud of you, bro. You're awesome. And you're going to help me write my book because I'm going to do it. That's one of my goals. I'm just not ready for that yet because I still got a lot of content I got to create in my life for the book. It's going to be good. I love it. I'm so excited. Thanks for coming out, Marcel. Let's win, guys. Randy starts a side hustle. We're going to have a monster episode coming up next week. Thank you, man.